Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. My wife called screaming. Where are you and the kids? I was at the park with my two sons. At Riverside Park, what's wrong? Listen to me. Get in your car and drive to the police station now. Don't go home. Don't call anyone. Her voice was trembling with terror. The phone went dead in my hand, leaving me staring at 8-year-old Tommy on the monkey bars and 6-year-old Jake building castles in the sandbox. Rebecca's voice had carried a fear I'd never heard before, not in 12 years of marriage, not even during her difficult pregnancies or when her father died. This was primal terror, the kind that makes your blood freeze and your mind race through every worst-case scenario imaginable. I grabbed both boys mid-swing and ran to the parking lot, their confused protests mixing with the sound of my boots hitting pavement. Tommy struggled against my grip, demanding to know why we were leaving, while Jake just held tight to his plastic shovel, sensing something was very wrong. As I buckled them into their car seats, my hands were steady. 15 years in Army intelligence had trained that response out of me, but my mind was already working through possibilities. Home invasion, kidnapping attempt, something involving my business, Sentinel Security Solutions, which had made me plenty of enemies over the years. The drive to the police station took 12 minutes, but felt like an hour. Every red light made me want to floor the accelerator. Every slow-moving car made me consider the shoulder. In the rearview mirror, I watched my boys' faces, Tommy's confusion deepening, while Jake just stared out the window with that 1,000-yard stare kids get when their world suddenly doesn't make sense anymore. These were my children, my responsibility, and someone had just threatened that in a way that sent my wife into complete panic. Detective Ray Castellanos met us at the station entrance. Ray and I went back to my first year running Sentinel, when I'd helped his department track down a ring of car thieves using stolen military-grade surveillance equipment. He was one of the few cops who knew my full background, including the parts that weren't in any official record. "Mike, what's going on?" Ray asked, leading us to a quiet conference room. "Your wife called 20 minutes ago, saying there was an immediate threat to your family, but when we sent units to your house, everything looked normal. No signs of break-in, no disturbance." I set the boys up with coloring books and juice boxes in the corner before turning back to Ray. "She was terrified, Ray. I've never heard Rebecca sound like that. What exactly did she tell you?" "She said someone had called your house claiming to have kidnapped you and the boys, demanding she wire $50,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. She said the voice was distorted, electronic, and they knew details about your family that only someone close would know. Specific details about the boys' schools, your business schedule, even what car you drive." The pieces clicked into place with the cold precision of a rifle bolt sliding home. This wasn't random. This was targeted, planned, and personal. In my line of work, you make enemies, but you also develop instincts about when someone is hunting you versus when you're dealing with opportunistic criminals. This felt like hunting. "Ray, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Has anyone been asking questions about me, my family, my business? Any unusual inquiries through official channels?" Ray's expression shifted, the casual friendliness replaced by the focused attention of a detective who just realized he was dealing with something bigger than a simple extortion attempt. "Actually, yeah. About 3 weeks ago, we got a call from someone claiming to be doing a background check for a federal contract you were bidding on. They wanted to know about any domestic disturbance calls to your address, any complaints filed against your business, that kind of thing." My blood turned to ice water. I hadn't bid on any federal contracts in 6 months, and the ones I had pursued didn't require law enforcement background checks. Someone had been fishing for information about me, looking for weaknesses, vulnerabilities, ammunition. "Did you give them anything?" "Nothing to give. You've never had so much as a noise complaint, Mike. Your record's cleaner than most cops I know. But the thing is, they asked specifically about domestic violence reports. Not general complaints, not business disputes. Domestic violence." The conference room suddenly felt too small, the fluorescent lights too bright. Someone was building a case against me, creating a narrative, and they were being very specific about what kind of narrative they wanted to create. In my experience, People only focused on domestic violence allegations when they were planning to use them as a weapon. "I need to call Rebecca," I said, pulling out my phone. She answered on the first ring. "Mike, are you at the station? Are the boys safe?" "We're all fine, Becca. But I need you to think carefully. This call you got about us being kidnapped. Can you remember anything specific about the voice? Any background noise? How long did the call last?" There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. The terror was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that made my chest tighten with a suspicion I didn't want to acknowledge. It was maybe 2 minutes. The voice was definitely electronic, like one of those voice changers you see in movies. They said they had you and the boys, that they'd been watching our house for weeks, that they knew you'd left with Tommy and Jake at exactly 2:15 for Riverside Park. "Becca, nobody's been watching our house. I would have noticed. And the only person who knew we were going to Riverside Park today was you." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mike, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that whoever called you knew things they shouldn't have known unless they were very close to our family. And I'm saying that someone's been asking questions about me for weeks, specifically about domestic violence. That's not a coincidence." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow. "You think someone we know is involved in this?" "I think someone we know is this." The silence stretched between us like a gulf opening in the earth. In that silence, I realized that my marriage, my family, my entire life might be built on a foundation that was about to crumble. But I also realized something else. If someone thought they could use my wife and children as weapons against me, they had severely underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. "Rebecca, I want you to stay at your sister's house tonight. Pack bags for a few days. Don't tell anyone where you're going, and don't use your credit cards. Pay cash for everything." "Mike, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. Because if I'm right about what's happening here, we're all in danger until I figure out who's behind this and why." After I hung up, Ray was studying me with the expression of a man who'd seen enough domestic situations to recognize the signs. "Mike, I have to ask, is everything okay at home? Between you and Rebecca?" It was a fair question, and I couldn't blame him for asking it. From the outside, this probably looked like a husband whose wife was trying to set him up for something, maybe creating evidence of threatening behavior to use in a divorce. The thought had already occurred to me, but it didn't fit. Rebecca wasn't that calculating, that cold. She was impulsive, emotional, sometimes naive about people's motives, but not manipulative. "Ray, Rebecca and I have our problems, like any couple. But she's not behind this. Someone else is pulling her strings, and they're using her emotions against both of us. Any idea who?" That was the question that had been gnawing at me since the moment Rebecca's voice changed on the phone. Who had access to our personal information? Who knew our routines, our relationships, our vulnerabilities? The list was shorter than you might think, but longer than I was comfortable with. I'm going to need some time to figure that out. But Ray, if someone comes to you with allegations against me, especially domestic violence allegations, I need you to remember this conversation. Someone is building a case, and they're planning to use it soon. Ray nodded slowly. "You want some advice from someone who's seen this kind of thing before?" "I'm listening. Whatever's happening here, don't handle it alone. You've got resources, connections, people who owe you favors. Use them. Because if someone's targeting your family, they're not going to stop with phone calls and psychological games." He was right, and I'd already started making a mental list of people I could trust, people who could help me figure out what was happening and who was behind it. But first, I needed to get my boys somewhere safe and start digging into the digital footprints this had left behind. As we left the police station, Tommy finally asked the question that had been building since I grabbed him off the monkey bars. "Dad, are we in trouble?" I knelt down to his level, looking into eyes that held too much worry for an 8-year-old. "No, buddy, we're not in trouble. But Daddy has to handle some grown-up problems, which means we're going to have a different kind of week. You and Jake are going to stay with Aunt Lisa for a few days while Mommy and Daddy figure some things out." "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the solar plexus, not because I hadn't expected it, but because I realized I didn't know the answer anymore. 24 hours ago, I would have said absolutely not. Rebecca and I had our issues. I worked too much, she felt isolated sometimes, We'd grown apart in small ways that seemed manageable, but nothing that felt terminal. Now, sitting in a police station parking lot after someone had used my wife's emotions to manipulate both of us, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I don't know, Tommy, but no matter what happens between mommy and daddy, you and Jake are the most important things in the world to us. That will never change. It was the most honest answer I could give him, and probably the most honest I'd been with myself in months. The drive to Lisa's house gave me time to think, to start putting together a timeline of events that might have led to this moment. Rebecca's sister lived in a gated community in the suburbs, the kind of place where security cameras covered every entrance and the homeowners association employed off-duty cops to patrol at night. If someone was targeting my family, Lisa's house was as safe as anywhere short of a military base. Lisa met us at the door with the expression of someone who'd been briefed on the basics, but was trying not to show alarm in front of the boys. She was Rebecca's older sister, a divorce attorney who'd never particularly liked me, but had always been civil for the sake of family harmony. Today, she looked at me with the calculating gaze of someone trying to determine if I was the threat or the solution. "The boys can stay as long as needed," she said, ushering Tommy and Jake toward the living room where her own kids were watching cartoons. "But Mike, I need to know what's really going on here." Rebecca called me crying, saying something about threats and police stations, but she wasn't making much sense. "Someone's playing games with our family, Lisa. I don't know who yet, but I'm going to find out. In the meantime, the boys are safer here than anywhere else." And Rebecca? Rebecca's going to have to decide who she trusts. Lisa's expression sharpened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that someone close to our family is feeding information to whoever's behind this. Someone who knows our routines, our relationships, our weak points. The list of people with that kind of access is very short." "You think Rebecca's involved?" "I think Rebecca's being used. The question is whether she knows it or not." I spent an hour with my boys, helping them settle in, answering their questions as honestly as I could without terrifying them. They were resilient kids, adaptable in the way children have to be when their parents' world suddenly becomes complicated. But I could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the way they kept looking toward the door as if expecting me to disappear again. When I finally left Lisa's house, the sun was setting, painting the suburban streets in shades of gold and red that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Now, they just reminded me that I was running out of daylight, and whoever had started this game had a significant head start. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca at Sarah's house. "Boys okay? Need to talk." Sarah, Rebecca's best friend since college, maid of honor at our wedding, godmother to Tommy. If Rebecca was confiding in anyone about problems in our marriage, it would be Sarah. And if someone wanted inside information about our relationship, Sarah would be a prime target. I typed back, "Boys safe. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't discuss this with anyone else." Her response came immediately. "Too late. Sarah says I should call a lawyer." And there it was. The next move in whatever game was being played. Someone had convinced my wife that she needed legal protection from me, probably planted the idea that I was dangerous, unstable, possibly violent. They'd used the phone call to create an atmosphere of fear and confusion, then guided her towards someone who would reinforce those fears. I sat in my car outside Lisa's house, watching the windows glow with warm light, knowing my boys were inside feeling safe for the moment. But I also knew that safety was an illusion. Someone had declared war on my family, and they'd chosen their battlefield carefully. The smart move would be to hire my own lawyer, start building defenses, prepare for whatever allegations were coming. But I learned a long time ago that the best defense isn't always defensive. Sometimes, you have to identify your enemy and eliminate the threat before they can use their weapons against you. I started the engine and headed home, not because it was safe, but because I needed to see what they'd left behind. In my experience, people who plan elaborate psychological operations always leave traces, always get overconfident about their own cleverness. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but I could see my neighbor Jim working in his garage across the street. Jim was a retired Marine, the kind of guy who noticed everything and remembered details. If anyone had been watching my house, he would have seen them. "Evening, Mike," Jim called out as I walked toward my front door. Everything okay? Saw some commotion earlier, police cars and such. Just a precautionary thing, Jim. Hey, you haven't noticed anyone hanging around the neighborhood lately, have you? Anyone who doesn't belong. Jim wiped his hands on a rag, his expression becoming more serious. Funny you should ask. There's been a blue sedan parked on Cedar Street for the past 3 weeks. Different times of day, never the same spot twice. Driver always has a newspaper or phone, trying to look casual, but I've been watching neighborhoods long enough to spot surveillance when I see it. Cedar Street ran parallel to our street, with clear sight lines to our house from several positions. Perfect for long-term observation without being obvious to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for it. You get a look at the driver? Middle-aged guy, maybe 45, 50. Average build, baseball cap pulled low. But Mike, the thing that caught my attention was the camera. Long lens, professional setup. This wasn't some private investigator taking pictures of a cheating spouse. This was serious surveillance. Professional surveillance meant professional money, which meant this wasn't personal revenge or opportunistic crime. Someone with resources had been studying my family for weeks, building profiles, looking for vulnerabilities. Inside the house, I moved through rooms that felt different somehow, as if the very air had been poisoned by deception. Everything looked normal. Rebecca's coffee cup still on the kitchen counter, the boys' toys scattered across the living room floor, yesterday's mail stacked on the dining room table. But normalcy was just another illusion now. I went to my home office, a converted bedroom where I kept the more sensitive equipment for my business. Hidden behind a false panel in the wall was a small safe containing backup hard drives, encrypted phones, and other tools that most suburban fathers don't keep in their houses. Tools from my previous life, when I'd worked in places where trust was a luxury and paranoia was a survival skill. The safe was untouched, but that didn't mean much. Professional surveillance teams don't need to break into your house when they can gather intelligence from a dozen other sources. They map your digital life, your social connections, your financial transactions. They build a complete picture of who you are and what matters to you. Then they find ways to use that information as a weapon. I powered up one of the encrypted phones and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Marcus here. Marcus Chun was the kind of man whose business card simply said consultant, but whose actual services range from corporate security to industrial espionage to darker specialties that I'd never asked about directly. We'd worked together during my last year in the Army, and he'd offer me a job when I decided to go civilian. I turned him down to start my own company, but we'd maintained a professional relationship that occasionally involved trading favors. Marcus, it's Mike Sullivan. I need a consultation. Mike, been a while. What's the situation? I gave him the bare details, the surveillance, the psychological manipulation, the targeting of my family. Marcus listened without interruption, asking only a few specific questions about timelines and technical details. Sounds like someone's running a long-term destabilization operation against you, he said when I finished. Professional grade, well-funded, probably multiple phases. The question is why? You piss off any major players recently? Take on any contracts that might have stepped on the wrong toes? Nothing that should have generated this level of response. My business is mostly corporate security, some private investigation work. I haven't worked government contracts in years. What about personal? Anyone from your past who might have the resources and motivation for something like this? That was the question I'd been avoiding because the answer was complicated. My military service had involved operations that created enemies, some of whom had long memories and patient dispositions. But most of those enemies were dead, in prison, or had moved on to other concerns. I'll need some time to think about that. But Marcus, I need 2 things from you right now. First, I need a complete electronic sweep of my house, my cars, my office. If they've been watching me for weeks, they might have planted devices. Done. I can have a team there in 2 hours. Second, I need deep background checks on 3 people. My wife, Rebecca, her friend, Sarah Martinez, and I paused, hating what I was about to say, but knowing it was necessary. Anyone Rebecca's been spending time with recently who I might not know about. You think your wife's involved? I think my wife's being manipulated by someone she trusts. And I think that someone has been feeding information to whoever's behind this operation. Mike, I have to ask this. Any chance your wife's having an affair? The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. It was the possibility I'd been circling around all day, the explanation that made too much sense to ignore but was too painful to confront directly. It's possible, I admitted. She's been distant lately, working late, new routines I'm not part of. I thought it was just the normal drift that happens in long marriages, but if she's involved with someone else, that someone might have their own agenda. They get close to her, gather intelligence about your family, your business, your vulnerabilities. Then they use that information to destroy your life and clear the field for themselves. It was a classic operation, the kind of thing I'd seen deployed against targets in hostile territories. Get close to someone the target trusts, exploit that relationship to gather intelligence, then use the intelligence to neutralize the target. Simple, effective, and devastating when executed properly. Marcus, if that's what's happening here, I need to know everything. Financial records, communication logs, travel patterns, associates. I need to know who she's been talking to, where she's been going, and what she's been telling them. I can get you that information, but Mike, you need to be prepared for what you might find. If your wife's been living a double life, the evidence is going to be brutal. And if her new boyfriend's the kind of guy who runs psychological operations against families, he's not going to go quietly when you expose him. Then I guess we're going to find out just how quietly I operate. After I hung up with Marcus, I sat in my office surrounded by the artifacts of a life that might be completely fictional. Wedding photos, family vacations, anniversary cards from a wife who might have been planning my destruction while smiling at me across the breakfast table. The possibility that Rebecca was betraying me felt like a physical wound, a constant ache in my chest that threatened to overwhelm rational thought. But I've been trained to compartmentalize emotions, to function under extreme stress, to make life-and-death decisions while people I cared about were in danger. That training was the only thing keeping me functional now. My phone buzzed with another text from Rebecca. Sarah thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. She says the way you talked to me earlier sounded paranoid, dangerous. Maybe you should talk to someone. And there it was, the narrative being built around me. First, I was a potential domestic abuser. Now, I was having a mental breakdown, becoming paranoid and dangerous. Soon, there would probably be evidence to support both allegations. Carefully crafted evidence that would stand up to casual scrutiny. I typed back, "I'm fine, Becca, but I think Sarah's giving you bad advice. We should talk tomorrow, just the two of us." Her response was immediate. "Sarah says I shouldn't be alone with you until this gets sorted out. She says if you're really innocent, you won't mind proving it through proper channels." Proper channels. Legal channels. Channels that would involve lawyers and judges and court proceedings that could drag on for months, while whoever was behind this consolidated their gains and prepared their next phase of attack. I turned off the phone and sat in the growing darkness, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere out there, my enemy was probably celebrating the success of the first phase of their operation. They'd successfully isolated me from my wife, created suspicion and fear where there had been trust and love, and started the process of painting me as the villain in my own life. They thought they understood who they were dealing with. They thought I was just another suburban husband who would crumble under psychological pressure, who would fight defensively and lose ground with every move. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Marcus's team arrived at midnight, 3 technicians with equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. They swept every room, every piece of electronics, every potential hiding place for surveillance devices. What they found confirmed my worst suspicions. 7 bugs total. Marcus reported, laying the tiny devices on my kitchen table like evidence in a murder trial. Audio only, but high quality. Long-range transmitters, probably monitored from within a half-mile radius. Professional installation, probably done over multiple visits. I picked up one of the devices, smaller than a dime, admiring the craftsmanship despite my fury. How long have they been in place? Based on the dust patterns and adhesive degradation, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks. Whoever did this had extensive access to your house and plenty of time to work. 3 to 4 weeks. That meant they'd been listening to my conversations with Rebecca with my children, with clients and friends. They'd heard every argument, every intimate moment, every casual comment that might be useful for building their psychological profile. There's something else, Marcus continued, holding up a small device I didn't recognize. This was behind your bedroom mirror. Video transmitter, motion activated. High definition, night vision capable. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They've been watching Rebecca and me in our most private moments, recording footage that could be edited and manipulated to support whatever narrative they were building. Marcus, I need those devices analyzed. I want to know who manufactured them, where they were purchased, and how they're being monitored. And I want it done quietly, already in motion. But Mike, there's something you need to see. He handed me a tablet displaying a complex network diagram, with my house at the center and lines extending to various points around the neighborhood. This is the surveillance network they've built around you. The blue sedan your neighbor noticed is just one component. They've got fixed observation posts here, here, and here. He pointed to locations on the map. Rotating vehicle surveillance, probably 3 teams working 8-hour shifts. Electronic monitoring of your phones, your computers, your credit cards. They've got you under the kind of coverage usually reserved for high-value targets in active war zones. I studied the diagram, noting the sophistication of the operation, the resources it would require, the level of planning involved. This wasn't personal revenge or a simple affair gone wrong. This was something much larger and more dangerous. Marcus, who has the capability for something like this? Government agencies, obviously. Major corporations with serious security departments. Organized crime syndicates. Private military contractors. Or very wealthy individuals with access to professionals who used to work for all of the above. Any of those fit with what you found so far? The equipment is all commercial grade, high-end, but available to anyone with enough money and the right connections. The techniques are military and intelligence derived, but that could be contractors who learned their trade in Iraq or Afghanistan. Without more information about the targets and motives, it's hard to narrow down the possibilities. I was about to respond when my phone rang. Rebecca's number. Mike, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on Maple Street? The one we used to go to? Her voice was different again. Calmer, more controlled, but with an undertone I couldn't quite identify. It might have been exhaustion, or fear, or guilt. Or it might have been the voice of someone who'd been coached on what to say. When? Now. I know it's late, but I can't sleep, and I think we need to clear the air before this gets any more complicated. The coffee shop on Maple Street was neutral territory, a public place where we'd had hundreds of casual conversations over the years. It was also a place where surveillance would be difficult, but not impossible, where a conversation could be recorded by someone with the right equipment and positioning. I'll be there in 20 minutes. After I hung up, Marcus was watching me with the expression of someone who'd seen too many operations go sideways because of emotional decisions. Mike, this could be a setup. If they've compromised your wife, they might be using her to get you into a controlled environment. I know, but I need to find out how deep this goes, and the only way to do that is to engage with them directly. You want backup? I want surveillance of the surveillance. If this is a setup, I want to know who's running it and how they're positioned. But stay invisible. I don't want to escalate this into an open confrontation until I understand what we're really dealing with. The drive to the coffee shop took me through the suburban streets I'd traveled thousands of times, but everything felt different now. Every car could be part of the surveillance network. Every shadow could hide an observer. Every routine interaction could be part of an elaborate deception. The photo was worse. It showed Tommy and Jake playing in our backyard, but someone had been close enough to capture clear images of their faces, their school uniforms, their routine activities. The message was clear. We can reach your children anytime we want. The document was a carefully worded contract, the kind that would hold up in court if anyone ever found it. In exchange for my complete withdrawal from Rebecca's life, my agreement to an uncontested divorce with minimal custody, and my transfer of all business assets to a shell corporation they controlled, the evidence would be destroyed and my children would be left alone. I was to respond within 24 hours. If I refused, the evidence would be sent to the police, the family court system, and my professional associates. If I tried to fight back or expose their operation, my children would be kidnapped and sold to people who specialized in making children disappear forever. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, hitting every pressure point simultaneously. They offered to let me keep my freedom and my life, but only if I abandoned everything that made life worth living. I closed the laptop and sat back in a booth, thinking through my options. The smart play would be to give them what they wanted, take the deal, and hope they kept their word about leaving my children alone. Most people in my situation would probably make that choice. But I wasn't most people. I was someone who'd spent 15 years learning how to hunt and kill people who thought they were untouchable. I was someone who understood that predators only stop when you make them stop. And I was someone who'd just been given a very clear picture of exactly who I was dealing with and what they were capable of. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "It's starting," I said when he answered. "I need everything we discussed, and I need it fast. We've got less than 24 hours before they start releasing their evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that will destroy my life and probably get me arrested." "Marcus, these people aren't just trying to ruin me. They're trying to erase me completely. Then we'd better make sure we erase them first." The next 6 hours were a blur of planning, preparation, and the kind of careful coordination that I hadn't engaged in since my military days. Marcus's team worked through the night, following digital breadcrumbs, analyzing surveillance patterns, and building a complete picture of the operation that had been targeting my family. What they found was both better and worse than I'd expected. Better, because the operation was smaller and more vulnerable than the sophisticated network they'd initially appear to be. Worse, because the people behind it were more dangerous and more personally motivated than I'd imagined. "We've got them," Marcus said, arriving at my house at dawn with a thick folder of intelligence reports. "The good news is that it's only 3 people. The bad news is that one of them is someone you know very well." He opened the folder and spread out surveillance photos, financial records, and communication logs that told a story I'd been dreading to hear. The operation was being run by Anthony Ricci, a man I put in prison 8 years ago when my company exposed his identity theft ring. He'd been released 6 months ago and had immediately begun planning his revenge. Sarah Martinez was his cousin, a professional con artist who'd spent 2 years infiltrating Rebecca's life, building trust, and gathering intelligence. The third member was a former military contractor named David Kane, who specialized in psychological operations and electronic surveillance. "It gets worse," Marcus continued. "Sarah didn't just randomly befriend your wife. She's been systematically destroying marriages for years, working for Ricci's operation to target the families of people who'd wronged him. Your wife is just the latest in a long line of victims." I studied the photos of Sarah with Rebecca, seeing them in a completely different light now. Every lunch, every conversation, every moment of support and friendship had been part of a calculated campaign to destroy my family. How many other families have they destroyed? At least 12 that we can document. Usually, the husband commits suicide or disappears completely. Sometimes the children end up in the foster system or worse. These people don't just ruin lives, Mike. They end them. The folder contained detailed records of their previous operations, showing the same pattern repeated over and over. They would identify a target, usually someone who'd cost Ricci money or freedom. They would spend months or years infiltrating the target's social circle, gathering intelligence, building psychological profiles. Then they would systematically destroy the target's family, usually through false allegations of domestic violence or child abuse. The evidence they created was always sophisticated enough to fool casual investigation, but not sophisticated enough to stand up to serious forensic analysis. The problem was that most of their targets never got the chance for serious forensic analysis. They either took plea deals to avoid going to trial, or they killed themselves rather than face the complete destruction of their lives. "They're expecting me to follow the same pattern," I said, studying their previous cases. "They think I'll either take their deal or kill myself rather than fight back." "Most people would," Marcus agreed. "But you're not most people." "No, I'm not. And I think it's time they learned exactly what kind of person they've been playing games with." The plan we developed over the next few hours was risky, probably illegal, and definitely lethal if it went wrong. But it was also the only way to ensure that Ricci's operation would never target another family. Phase 1 involved turning their own surveillance network against them. Marcus's team had identified all of their observation posts and electronic monitoring stations. Instead of dismantling them, we were going to feed them false information, making them think their plan was working while we prepared our counterattack. Phase 2 involved Sarah Martinez. She was the weak link in their operation, the one who'd formed a genuine emotional connection with her target. Rebecca might not know Sarah's true identity, but she trusted her completely. That trust was going to be Sarah's downfall. Phase 3 was the part that would require all of my training and most of my luck. I was going to walk into their trap, let them think they'd won, and then systematically destroy all three of them in a way that would ensure they never threatened another family. The coffee shop was nearly empty at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. Just a few college students studying for exams and a homeless man nursing a cup of coffee by the window. Rebecca was already there, sitting in our usual corner booth, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "You look terrible," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thanks." That's exactly what every woman wants to hear. She managed a weak smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mike, what's happening to us?" Yesterday morning, everything was normal, and now I feel like I'm living in some kind of nightmare. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, manipulation, or hidden knowledge. But all I saw was exhaustion and confusion, the expression of someone who'd been caught in forces beyond her understanding. "Becca, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them honestly. Have you been having an affair?" The directness of the question hit her like a slap. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, anger, before settling on something that looked like resignation. "No, Mike, I haven't been having an affair. But She paused, staring at her hands folded on the table. "I've been thinking about it." "With who?" "Does it matter?" I said I was thinking about it, not doing it. It matters because someone's been feeding information about our family to people who want to hurt us. And the list of people with access to that kind of information is very short. Rebecca looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes that wasn't related to mysterious phone calls or threats from strangers. "You think I'm involved in this? You think I'm working with someone to what? Destroy our marriage? Hurt our children?" "I think you've been talking to someone who's not who they appear to be. Someone who's been asking questions about our relationship, our problems, maybe suggesting solutions that involve lawyers or separation or legal protection for me." The way her face changed told me I was on the right track. The confusion was replaced by something else, something that looked like the dawning realization that she'd been played. "Sarah," she whispered. "What about Sarah? God, Mike, she's been so supportive lately. When I told her we'd been having problems, that I felt like you were distant and maybe hiding things from me, she was the one who suggested that maybe there was more going on than I realized. She said sometimes men who seem stable and controlled on the outside are actually capable of terrible things." "When did these conversations start?" "About a month ago. I was having lunch with her, complaining about work and marriage and feeling like I was stuck in a rut. She asked if I'd ever considered that maybe the problem wasn't me. Maybe it was you. She said she'd noticed things about you that worried her." "What kind of things?" "The way you watch people, like you're constantly assessing threats. The way you never really talk about your time in the Army. The fact that you have guns in the house, and sometimes were cases that you won't discuss with me." She said those were red flags, signs of someone who might be living a double life. I felt a cold fury building in my chest. Sarah Martinez had been systematically poisoning my wife's perception of me, feeding her paranoia and suspicion, preparing her to believe that I was dangerous. "Becca, how well do you really know Sarah? Have you ever met her family, visited her house, seen where she works?" Rebecca frowned, thinking, "We always meet at restaurants or coffee shops." She says she travels a lot for work, that her apartment is small and not good for entertaining. "I've known her since college, Mike. We were roommates for 2 years. When's the last time you talked to anyone else from college about Sarah? When's the last time you verified any of the things she's told you about her life?" The question hung between us like a bomb with a burning fuse. Rebecca's face went through another series of changes as she started to realize the implications of what I was suggesting. You think Sarah isn't who she says she is? I think Sarah's been running a long-term operation against our marriage, gathering intelligence, building psychological profiles, and preparing to destroy our family from the inside. Rebecca shook her head, but the denial lacked conviction. That's crazy, Mike. Why would she do that? What could she possibly gain? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Enjoying your coffee? You two make such a lovely couple. It's a shame it has to end this way. I showed Rebecca the message, watching her face go pale as the reality of our situation finally sank in. They're watching us right now, she whispered. They've been watching us for weeks. The question is what they're planning to do with all the information they've gathered. My phone buzzed again. Check your email in exactly 1 hour. Come alone, or the boys will see things that will give them nightmares for the rest of their lives. The threat against my children changed everything. This was no longer about my marriage or my business or my reputation. This was about protecting Tommy and Jake from whatever twisted game was being played around them. Rebecca, I need you to go to Lisa's house right now. Don't stop anywhere. Don't call anyone. Don't use your credit cards. When you get there, tell Lisa to activate the security system and not answer the door for anyone except me or the police. What about you? I'm going to end this. Mike, maybe we should just give them whatever they want. Money, information, whatever it takes to make this stop. I looked at my wife, seeing the fear and desperation in her eyes, and realized she still didn't understand the nature of what we were facing. Becca, this isn't about money. This is about power, control, and probably revenge for something I did years ago. People like this don't stop when you give them what they want. They just escalate until they've taken everything that matters to you. Then what do? We fight back. After Rebecca left for Lisa's house, I sat alone in the coffee shop, watching the few remaining customers and trying to spot the surveillance team I knew was out there. The homeless man by the window was reading a newspaper that was 3 days old. The college student in the corner had been nursing the same cup of coffee for over an hour. Either could be part of the operation, or they could be exactly what they appear to be. At exactly midnight, I checked my email. The message was from an account I didn't recognize, with a subject line that made my blood run cold. The price of betrayal. The email contained 3 attachments. The first was a video file labeled Evidence A. The second was a photo labeled Evidence B. The third was a document labeled Terms and Conditions. I opened the video file and immediately understood why they'd waited until now to make contact. The footage showed me and Rebecca in our bedroom, but it had been edited to make it appear that I was forcing myself on her, that she was struggling and afraid. The editing was sophisticated, combining audio from our arguments with video from our intimate moments, creating a narrative of domestic violence and sexual assault that would be devastating in a courtroom. Mike, Mark has said as his team prepared to deploy. Once we start this, there's no going back. These people have killed before, and they won't hesitate to kill again. If they realize what we're doing before we can complete the operation, they'll come after your family with everything they have. Then we'd better make sure they don't realize what we're doing. At 8 a.m., I called Rebecca to check on her and the boys. She sounded better, more like herself, probably because she'd spent the night away from Sarah's influence. The boys are asking when they can come home, she said. I told them maybe today, but I wanted to check with you first. Give me a few more hours to sort things out. There are some people I need to talk to, some things I need to clear up. Mike, last night, thinking about everything Sarah's been telling me, I think I've been wrong about a lot of things. I think maybe she's been manipulating me, making me paranoid and suspicious for reasons I don't understand. What makes you say that? Little things that didn't seem important at the time. Questions she asked about your work, your schedule, your friends. The way she always steered our conversations toward problems in our marriage. And the timing of when she started doing it, right around the time you said the surveillance began. My wife was smart, intuitive, and finally starting to see through the web of deception that had been built around her. That was going to make the next phase of the operation much easier. Rebecca, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to require you to trust me completely. What do you need? I need you to call Sarah and tell her you've decided to file for divorce. Tell her you want to meet this afternoon to discuss your options. But don't meet her at a public place. Invite her to Lisa's house. There was a long pause before Rebecca responded. Mike, if you're right about Sarah, isn't that dangerous? Isn't that like inviting a snake into Lisa's house? Rebecca, the snake's already in the house. She's been there for 2 years. Now we're going to use her own tactics against her. What do you want me to say to her? Tell her the truth. Tell her that I've been acting paranoid and erratic, that you're afraid of me, that you need help figuring out how to protect yourself and the boys. Tell her you've decided she was right about everything. And then we're going to show her exactly what happens to people who threaten my family. The confrontation at Lisa's house was scheduled for 2 p.m., which gave us 6 hours to prepare the battlefield. Marcus's team had already installed their own surveillance equipment throughout the house, high-definition cameras and audio devices that would capture every word and gesture of what was about to unfold. More importantly, they'd identified and compromised all of Ricci's electronic surveillance, feeding his team false information that would make them think everything was going according to plan. As far as Ricci knew, I was panicking. Rebecca was moving toward divorce, and Sarah was successfully guiding my wife toward the choices that would complete my destruction. Lisa's not happy about this. Rebecca told me when I arrived at the house an hour before Sarah was due to arrive. She thinks we're putting her family at risk. Lisa's right to be concerned, I admitted, but her family's already at risk. These people don't leave witnesses, and they don't stop until they've eliminated everyone who might expose their operation. You really think they would hurt Lisa and her kids? I think they've killed 12 other families, and I think they're planning to kill ours. Lisa's family is just collateral damage to them. Rebecca looked pale, but determined. What do you need me to do? Exactly what you would do if you really were planning to divorce me. Be emotional, be frightened. Ask Sarah for advice about lawyers and custody and protecting yourself from a dangerous husband. The more convinced she is that her manipulation worked, the more she'll reveal about their operation. And you, I'll be listening to every word. At exactly 2 p.m., Sarah Martinez arrived at Lisa's house, carrying flowers and wearing the expression of a concerned friend. She was attractive in an understated way, the kind of woman who could blend into any social situation without drawing attention. Perfect for a long-term infiltration operation. Marcus and I were positioned in Lisa's home office, watching through hidden cameras as Sarah embraced Rebecca and began the conversation that would determine whether my family lived or died. You sounded so upset on the phone, Sarah said, settling onto the couch next to Rebecca. Tell me exactly what happened last night. Rebecca was perfect, channeling real emotions from our deteriorating marriage into a performance that would have convinced me if I hadn't known better. He was so cold, Sarah, so calculating. When I told him about the phone call, instead of being concerned about my safety, he immediately started suggesting that I was involved somehow. He made me feel like I was crazy for being scared. That's classic psychological abuse, Sarah responded, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Making you doubt your own perceptions, turning your emotions against you. It's exactly what I was worried about. I kept thinking about what you said, about how men like Mike can seem normal on the surface, but be capable of terrible things underneath. Last night, I saw that side of him for the first time, and it terrified me. Sarah leaned forward, her expression becoming more intense. Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has Mike ever hurt you physically? Ever pushed you, grabbed you, anything that made you feel unsafe? Not exactly, Rebecca said, and I could see her struggling with the implications of what she was being asked to say. But there have been times when he gets angry, when I can see him controlling himself, like he wants to do something but stops himself. That's the restraint of someone who knows they're capable of violence, Sarah said. Rebecca, I think you and the boys are in serious danger. I think Mike's been hiding his true nature for years, and now that he feels threatened, that mask is starting to slip. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Sarah was building the same narrative they'd used on their previous victims, painting me as a man on the verge of explosive violence. What should I do? Rebecca asked, and the desperation in her voice was completely genuine. First, you need to document everything. Every threat, every moment when he makes you feel unsafe, every time he tries to isolate you from your support system. Second, You need to file for a restraining order immediately. Don't wait for him to escalate. What about the boys? Emergency custody. We'll petition the court to give you temporary full custody based on the documented threats and your legitimate fear for their safety. I watched Sarah's face as she outlined the plan, seeing the cold calculation behind her mask of concern. This wasn't friendship or genuine care for Rebecca's welfare. This was a predator guiding her prey toward destruction. Sarah, Rebecca said, how do you know so much about this? About restraining orders and custody proceedings? For just a moment, Sarah's mask slipped, and I saw something else underneath. Something harder and more dangerous. I've been through this myself, Sarah said. My ex-husband was similar to Mike. Controlling, potentially violent, good at hiding his true nature from everyone except me. I had to learn how to protect myself and my daughter. It was a lie, of course. Sarah had never been married, had no children, and her expertise came from years of helping to destroy other families. But it was a believable lie, the kind that would make Rebecca trust her even more completely. What happened to your ex-husband? Rebecca asked. Sarah's smile was cold and satisfied. He killed himself rather than face the consequences of his actions. Sometimes, that's the only way men like that can handle losing control. The implication was clear. Sarah was telling Rebecca that I would probably kill myself when faced with the destruction of my life, and she was presenting that outcome as a positive resolution to the problem. That's when I decided Sarah Martinez was going to die today. I signaled to Marcus and moved toward the living room, timing my entrance for maximum psychological impact. Sarah was leaning close to Rebecca, probably about to reveal more details of their plan when I walked through the door. Hello, Sarah, I said, closing the door behind me and engaging the deadbolt. We need to talk. Sarah's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of surprise or confusion, her hand moved toward her purse, and her eyes started scanning the room for exits. These were the responses of someone who'd been expecting trouble and was prepared for violence. Mike, Rebecca said, starting to stand. I thought you were going to wait until... Sit down, Rebecca, I said, keeping my eyes on Sarah. Sarah and I have some things to discuss about her relationship with our family. Sarah's hand had stopped moving toward her purse, but I could see her calculating options, trying to decide whether she could reach whatever weapon she was carrying before I could stop her. I don't know what you think is happening here, Sarah said, her voice taking on a different quality, harder and more controlled than the concerned friend persona she'd been maintaining. But I think you need to leave. Rebecca called me because she was afraid of you, and your behavior right now is confirming her fears. Rebecca called you because you've been manipulating her for 2 years, feeding her paranoia and suspicion, gathering intelligence about our family for your cousin Anthony Ricci. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her carefully maintained mask shattered completely, revealing the cold predator underneath. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her body language had changed completely. She was no longer playing the concerned friend. She was assessing threats and preparing for violence. Rebecca, I said, still watching Sarah, would you like to know who your best friend really is? Her real name is Sarah Ricci. She's never been married. She has no children, and she spent the last 2 years destroying our marriage as part of an elaborate revenge scheme. Rebecca looked back and forth between us, confusion and dawning horror warring on her face. Sarah, is that true? Sarah's laugh was bitter and contemptuous. Does it matter? Everything I told you about your husband is still true. He's still a controlling, potentially violent man who's been lying to you for years. The only person who's been lying is you, I said. For 2 years, you've been poisoning Rebecca's mind, gathering information about our family, and preparing to destroy our lives. And it worked, Sarah said, abandoning all pretense now. Your wife doesn't trust you anymore. Your children are afraid of you. Your business reputation is about to be destroyed by evidence that will convince everyone that you're a domestic abuser and a sexual predator. Rebecca gasped, but I kept my focus on Sarah. Evidence that you manufactured using surveillance equipment you placed in our house. Evidence that will stand up in court and destroy your life, Sarah confirmed. Unless, of course, you're smart enough to take the deal we offered. What deal? Rebecca asked. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email I'd received the night before. They want me to give up everything, my business, my assets, my custody rights, in exchange for not releasing fabricated evidence that would send me to prison. Rebecca read the terms of the contract, her face growing paler with each line. Sarah, you're part of this? You've been helping them blackmail my husband. I've been helping you see the truth about what kind of man you married, Sarah said. And I've been helping you prepare for a life without him. By lying to me? By recording us in our bedroom? By threatening our children? Sarah's expression turned contemptuous. Your children will be better off without a father like him. And you'll be better off without a husband who's been lying to you about who he really is. You're right about one thing, I said. I haven't been completely honest with Rebecca about who I really am. Both women turned to look at me, and I let them see past the mask of suburban respectability I'd been wearing for 12 years. I'm not just a former soldier who runs a security company. I'm someone who spent 15 years hunting and killing people who thought they were untouchable. People like terrorists, war criminals, and human traffickers. People like your cousin Anthony. Sarah's hand started moving toward her purse again, but I was faster. I crossed the distance between us in 2 steps and pinned her wrist to the couch before she could reach whatever weapon she was carrying. People like you, I continued, feeling her pulse racing under my grip. People who prey on families, who destroy children's lives for money, who think they can threaten my wife and sons without consequences. Mike, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. What are you doing? I'm ending this, I said, maintaining my grip on Sarah's wrist while I pulled her purse away and dumped its contents on the coffee table. Along with the usual items you'd expect to find in a woman's purse, there was a 9mm pistol, a syringe filled with clear liquid, and a cell phone that immediately started ringing. That'll be Anthony, I said, looking at the caller ID. Probably wondering why you haven't checked in. Sarah glared at me with pure hatred. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Anthony's not going to let this go. If you hurt me, he'll hunt down your family and make them suffer in ways you can't imagine. Anthony's already dead, I said matter-of-factly. The statement hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Rebecca stared at me in shock, while Sarah's face went through a range of emotions before settling on disbelief. You're lying, Sarah said. I picked up her phone and answered the call, putting it on speaker. Sarah? Sarah, are you there? The voice was panicked, desperate. Something's wrong. Tony's not answering his phone, and Kane's surveillance post went dark an hour ago. Who is this? I asked. The line went silent for a long moment before a different voice came on, harder and more controlled. This is David Kane. I'm guessing you're Michael Sullivan. That's right. And I'm guessing you're the last member of Anthony Ricci's operation. Where's Tony? Where's Sarah? Anthony's where people like him belong, and Sarah's about to join him. You son of a bitch, Kane said. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know what we'll do to your family? You're not going to do anything to my family, I said, because in about 10 minutes, you're going to be just as dead as your partner. I hung up the phone and turned back to Sarah, who was staring at me with the expression of someone who'd finally realized exactly how much trouble she was in. Rebecca, I said, I need you to take the boys and go to your mother's house in Phoenix. Stay there until I call you and tell you it's safe to come home. Mike, what did you do to Anthony? What are you going to do to Sarah? I'm going to make sure they never threaten another family. You can't just kill people, Mike. This isn't a war zone. There are laws, courts, legal ways to handle this. I looked at my wife, seeing the moral certainty in her eyes, the belief that civilization's rules applied to people like Sarah and Anthony and Kane. Rebecca, these people have destroyed 12 families. They've killed children, driven fathers to suicide, and left mothers broken and alone. The legal system can't stop them because they're too smart, too careful, and too connected. The only way to stop people like this is to make them disappear. That's not who you are, Mike. That's not the man I married. Yes, it is, I said. It's exactly who I am. I'm someone who protects his family by eliminating threats. I'm someone who doesn't forgive betrayal or forget when people try to hurt the people I love. Sarah laughed bitterly. She's right, you know. This will destroy your marriage anyway. Even if you kill all of us, she'll never look at you the same way again. She'll never trust you. never feel safe with you. You'll lose your family anyway. Maybe, I admitted. But my children will be alive, and the people who threaten them will be dead. That's a trade I'm willing to make. Rebecca was crying now, understanding finally that the man she'd married was capable of things she'd never imagined. Mike, please. There has to be another way. There is another way, Sarah said quickly, sensing an opportunity. Take the deal. Give us what we want, and we'll disappear. You'll never see us again. Like you disappeared from the other 12 families you destroyed? I asked. Like you would have disappeared after you sold my children to human traffickers? Sarah's face went white. She hadn't expected me to know about that part of their plan. That's right, I continued. Marcus found your communications with the buyers in Eastern Europe. $50,000 each for healthy American children under 10 years old. You weren't just planning to destroy my life. You were planning to sell my sons into slavery. Rebecca's sobbing intensified, and I could see the exact moment when she understood that there really was no other choice, no legal solution that would protect our children from people this evil. What do you need me to do? She asked quietly. Take the boys to Phoenix. Stay there until this is over. And try not to think too much about what happens next. After Rebecca left with the boys, I was alone with Sarah in Lisa's living room. She'd stopped trying to maintain any pretense of innocence and was watching me with the calculation of a predator trying to figure out how to escape a trap. So what now? She asked. Are you going to torture me for information? Try to make me suffer before you kill me? I'm going to give you a choice, I said. You can tell me everything about your operation, where Kane is positioned, what other assets you have in play, how many other families you're currently targeting, and I'll make your death quick and clean. And if I don't, then I'll hand you over to some associates of mine who specialize in extracting information from people who don't want to cooperate. They're very good at their job, but they're not particularly concerned with minimizing suffering. Sarah considered this for a long moment, weighing her options. Kane's positioned in the abandoned warehouse on Industrial Boulevard, she said finally. He's got surveillance equipment covering all the approaches, and he's heavily armed. There's also a backup team in a van parked 2 blocks away. How many in a backup team? 2 men. Contractors Kane hired for this operation. They don't know the full scope of what we've been doing. What other families are you targeting? 3 active operations. The Martinez family in Dallas, the Chun family in Seattle, and the Williams family in Atlanta. All revenge targets for people who cost Anthony money over the years. I made notes on my phone, information that Marcus would need to prevent other families from suffering the same fate we'd almost met. Is that everything? That's everything that matters. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but I thought she was telling the truth. She'd given up her partner and her operation to buy herself a few more minutes of life. Sarah, I want you to understand something. This isn't personal. You're not dying because I'm angry or because I want revenge. You're dying because you're a threat to children, and I don't allow threats to children to continue existing. I understand, she said. For what it's worth, your wife really did love you. The feelings she shared with me, the doubts and fears, those were real. I didn't create those problems in your marriage. I just exploited them. I know, I said. And that's something Rebecca and I will have to work through if we're going to have a future together. Do you think you will? Have a future together? I don't know, but I know my children will have a future, and that's what matters most. I pulled out the syringe that had been in Sarah's purse and checked the contents. It was potassium chloride, probably intended for me if their psychological manipulation hadn't worked. Heart attack, I said. Quick and relatively painless. Probably what you were planning to use on me. Poetic justice, Sarah said. Something like that. I injected the potassium chloride into Sarah's arm, and she was unconscious within seconds, dead within minutes. I checked her pulse to confirm, then called Marcus. Sarah's down. What's the status on Kane? He's barricaded in the warehouse, but he's not going anywhere. We've got the building surrounded, and we've jammed all his communications. The backup team is neutralized. Alive or dead? Alive. They really didn't know what they were involved in, so we gave them a choice. They're on a plane to South America right now, with enough money to start new lives and stern warnings about what happens if they ever come back. And Kane's a different story. He knows exactly what he's done, and he's not interested in surrender. He's got enough weapons and ammunition to hold out for days. Then we end this now. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The warehouse where Cain had made his final stand was a perfect defensive position, a concrete bunker with limited approaches and multiple escape routes. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken a SWAT team hours to clear it safely. But these weren't normal circumstances, and I wasn't operating under the constraints that limited law enforcement. Marcus had positioned his team around the building's perimeter, using electronic surveillance to track Cain's movements inside. He was on the third floor, in a room with windows facing all directions, surrounded by enough firepower to outfit a small army. He's got night vision, body armor, and automatic weapons, Marcus reported, plus claymore mines covering the stairwells and enough explosives to bring down the building if he decides to go out in a blaze of glory. Any way to get to him without triggering the explosives? There's a freight elevator that goes directly to the third floor, but it's exposed to his position. He'd see us coming and have plenty of time to activate the charges. What if he didn't see us coming? Marcus looked at me with the expression of someone who just realized what I was thinking. Mike, that's a hell of a risk. If the timing's off by even a few seconds, the timing won't be off. It took 2 hours to set up the operation. Marcus's team created multiple diversions around the building's perimeter, keeping Cain focused on the wrong directions while I approached from the one angle he couldn't see. The freight elevator shaft was accessible from the basement, and the elevator itself could be controlled manually from inside the shaft. At exactly midnight, Marcus triggered a coordinated assault on the building's east side, drawing Cain's attention and firepower away from the elevator. I had a 30-second window to reach the third floor before Cain realized it was a diversion. The ride up the elevator shaft in complete darkness, listening to gunfire and explosions echoing through the building, was like being transported back to Afghanistan. The same adrenaline, the same focus, the same absolute clarity that comes when your life depends on perfect execution. The elevator stopped 6 inches below the third floor, giving me a clear view of Cain's position. He was exactly where Marcus had predicted, firing an automatic rifle through the east windows, completely focused on the imaginary threat approaching from that direction. I came up through the elevator shaft behind him like a ghost materializing from the darkness. He didn't know I was there until I put the barrel of my pistol against the back of his head. "David Cain," I said. He froze, his fingers still on the trigger of his rifle. "Michael Sullivan. I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Turn around." He complied slowly, keeping his hands visible, his rifle pointed at the floor. Up close, he looked like what he was, a professional killer who'd spent too many years in dark places, doing things that had carved the humanity out of his face. "So you're the suburban husband who thinks he's a soldier," Cain said. "Anthony said you'd gotten soft, living your little domestic life, playing house with your wife and kids." Anthony was wrong about a lot of things. Apparently. Where is he, by the way? "Somewhere you'll be joining him shortly." Cain laughed. "You think killing us solves anything? You think this ends here? There are dozens of operations like ours, hundreds of people like us. We're a symptom, not the disease. Maybe, but you'll never threaten another family. Neither will you, once word gets out about what you've done tonight. You think your wife's going to stick around once she realizes what kind of monster she's been sleeping next to for 12 years. That's between Rebecca and me. Is it? Because I've got video of everything that happened at your sister-in-law's house tonight. Sarah's murder, your confession to killing Anthony, your threats against me. It's all being broadcast live to several very interested parties." I felt a cold certainty settle in my chest. Cain had been recording our confrontation, probably streaming it in real time to associates who would use it as evidence against me. "Even if you kill me," Cain continued, "the evidence of what you've done tonight will destroy your life just as effectively as our original plan would have. Then I guess I don't have anything left to lose." Cain's expression changed as he realized what I was thinking. "You're insane," he said. "You'd blow up this building with both of us in it. I'd do whatever it takes to protect my family. Your family's already destroyed. Your wife will never forgive you for what you've done tonight. Your children will grow up knowing their father was a murderer. My children will grow up alive, safe, and free from people like you. That's all that matters. I could see Kane calculating his options, trying to decide whether I was bluffing about the explosives. There's another way, he said finally. I can make the evidence disappear. All of it. The recordings from tonight, the fabricated evidence we collected over the past month. Everything. Your life goes back to normal, and I disappear. In exchange for my life, and a promise that you'll never come after me again. I pretended to consider the offer while I positioned myself closer to the detonator for the explosives Kane had placed throughout the building. How do I know you'll keep your word? Because I'm a professional, and professionals honor their contracts. You mean like the contract you honored with the 12 families you destroyed? Kane's face hardened. That was business. This is survival. For you, maybe. For me, this is justice. I grabbed the detonator and activated the charges before Kane could react. The building shook with the force of multiple explosions, but the third floor held together long enough for me to reach the window. Kane was screaming something about the evidence, about his associates, about revenge, but his words were lost in the sound of collapsing concrete and twisting steel. I went through the window just as the floor gave way beneath Kane's feet, dropping him into the inferno that had been the second floor. The last thing I saw of him was his face, twisted with rage and disbelief that his professional detachment had been shattered by someone who fought with personal fury. Marcus's team pulled me out of the debris field with second-degree burns on my arms and a concussion that left me dizzy for hours. But I was alive, and more importantly, my family was safe. The official story was that Kane and his associates had been killed in an accidental explosion while manufacturing illegal weapons. Sarah Martinez had died of a heart attack, possibly brought on by stress related to her involvement with criminals. Anthony Ricci had simply disappeared, another casualty of the violent world he'd chosen to inhabit. The evidence they'd fabricated against me was destroyed in the warehouse explosion, along with their surveillance equipment and operational records. The 3 families they'd been targeting in other cities were quietly warned and protected, their lives saved by information extracted from Sarah before she died. But Kane had been right about one thing. The cost of protecting my family was my marriage. Rebecca came back from Phoenix a week later, but she looked at me like I was a stranger wearing her husband's face. She'd had time to process what she'd witnessed, to understand exactly what kind of man she'd been married to for 12 years. I know you saved us, she said on the night she returned. I know you protected our children from people who would have destroyed their lives. But Mike, I can't stop seeing you inject that woman with poison. I can't stop hearing you talk about killing people like it was just another job. It was just another job, I said. The most important job I've ever done. I understand that, but I don't know if I can live with it. I don't know if I can live with you, knowing what you're capable of. We tried counseling, tried rebuilding trust, tried finding a way back to the life we'd had before Sarah Martinez poisoned it with doubt and fear. But the foundation had been cracked too badly to support the weight of what we'd learned about each other. Rebecca filed for divorce 6 months later, but it was amicable, honest, and focused on what was best for Tommy and Jake. I got generous visitation rights, and she got the certainty that her children would always be protected by someone who would kill to keep them safe. The boys adapted better than either of us expected. They knew their parents had been through something terrible, but they also knew they were loved and protected. They split their time between Rebecca's new apartment and my house, where they learned to shoot straight, think clearly, and never trust strangers who ask too many questions about their family. Sarah Martinez had been right about one thing. Rebecca never looked at me the same way again. The trust was gone, replaced by a wary respect and a deep understanding that the man she'd married was someone she'd never really known. But she was wrong about everything else. My children didn't grow up damaged by what happened. They grew up strong, protected, and absolutely certain that their father would never let anything happen to them. 3 years later, I'm still running Sentinel Security Solutions, but now I specialize in a very particular type of client. Families who've been targeted by predators like Anthony Ricci's operation. Families who need someone with my particular skills and moral flexibility to solve problems that the legal system can't touch. It's not the life I planned, but But it's the life I chose when I decided that protecting innocent people was more important than maintaining comfortable illusions about civilization's ability to stop monsters. Rebecca remarried last year, a decent man who works in insurance and has never killed anyone. He's good to her and good to the boys, and I genuinely hope they have the kind of normal, peaceful life that people like me make possible by doing the things people like him can't imagine. Sometimes I wonder if I could have found another way, a legal solution that would have stopped Ricci's operation without requiring me to become a killer again. But then I think about the 12 families they'd already destroyed and the 3 families they were planning to target next, and I know I made the only choice that mattered. Evil exists in the world, and sometimes it takes the form of people who smile and offer friendship while they're planning your destruction. When you meet people like that, you have 2 choices. You can trust in systems and institutions and legal processes that move too slowly to save the innocent, or you can become something darker and more dangerous than they are. I chose to become the monster that monsters fear. And every night when I check the locks on my doors and test the security system that protects my house, I sleep peacefully knowing that somewhere out there, predators think twice before targeting families because they know someone like me might be waiting for them in the darkness. That's the price of betrayal. Not just the betrayal of trust between husband and wife, but the betrayal of innocence, the betrayal of faith in humanity's fundamental decency. Some betrayals can be forgiven and overcome. Others change you so completely that forgiveness becomes irrelevant. The people who threatened my family didn't just betray me. They betrayed the social contract that keeps civilization functioning, the unspoken agreement that children are off limits, that families are sacred, that some lines should never be crossed. They learned, in the last moments of their lives, that some people take that contract very seriously indeed. And now, 3 years later, when I tuck my sons into bed and listen to their prayers and watch them sleep peacefully in their rooms, I know that the price I paid was worth every sleepless night, every lost relationship, every piece of my soul that I traded away to keep them safe. Because in the end, that's what fathers do. We become whatever we need to become to protect our children. Even if it means becoming something our wives can't love, our friends can't understand, and our enemies can't survive. The boys still call me Daddy. Rebecca still calls me when she needs help with something important. And somewhere in the world, families sleep safely because predators remember what happened to the last group of people who thought they could threaten children and walk away unscathed. That's enough. That has to be enough. Because the alternative is a world where monsters like Anthony Ricci and Sarah Martinez and David Kane operate with impunity, destroying families for profit and entertainment, safe in the knowledge that their victims are too civilized, too trusting, too bound by laws and morality to fight back effectively. I chose to be uncivilized when civilization failed. I chose to be unforgiving when forgiveness would have enabled more victims. I chose to be the kind of man who kills people who threaten children, and I'll make that choice again every single time it's presented to me. That's who I am. That's who I've always been, underneath the suburban facade and the comfortable domesticity. I'm Michael Sullivan, and I'm the reason that people like Anthony Ricci don't sleep peacefully at night. And if you're reading this story because you're thinking about targeting a family, about destroying lives for profit or revenge or entertainment, then you should understand one simple truth. There are more people like me than you realize, and we're always watching, always waiting, always ready to remind you that some prices are paid in blood. Choose your targets carefully, because you never know when the suburban father you're planning to destroy might turn out to be someone who's very, very good at destroying people like you. The price of betrayal is always higher than you think you can afford, but it's a price that predators pay whether they want to or not, because people like me make sure they don't have a choice. Sleep well, and remember, we're watching. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.